Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Alrighty, welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode number 44. I wanted to impart all of my wisdom to my son, but of course my son already thinks he knows more than me. So instead of trying to tell him now and having it go one ear and out the other ear, I decided to record them here in the hopes that maybe, just maybe in the future when he's ready, he'll listen to my advice and not make the same stupid mistakes I made. I also bring on guests to impart their wisdom as well. I have no doubt their wisdom will always be better than my wisdom. This week, I brought on actor Junko Goda. Junko, how are you?
Hey, I am doing great. Well, considering, yes.
Considering the pandemic and everything and the stay-at-home order and everything, all that. Junko, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My parents immigrated from Japan back in the 70s. So I grew up in Chicago, went to school out east. So I was out there for 5 years. I actually studied biochemistry in college.
Wow.
And
good
that's
Asian.
what I started out with.
Good Asian.
I know. Yes. And then I was like, no way, I don't want to do that. I want to be an actor. So
That Asian.
And drove out to LA. It's been 15 years since I've been out here, and it's been a really interesting journey. Nothing was ever pre-planned, and it's been really interesting, a lot of turns. So I'm an actor, as Koji said. I also do a lot of interpreting and translating. I've got to work on big films. I also do a lot in the anime manga world too. So I go to a lot of conventions as well.
Great. That's awesome. And I didn't even realize you're from Chicago. Did you know Milton? You didn't have to know Milton. I mean, there's
no. I don't know. I actually didn't know any Japanese Americans or Asian Americans, for that matter, in Chicago, because I hung out, like I would go to Saturday school, I went to Japanese school. So in my mind, I went to American school Monday through Friday. I went to Japanese school on Saturday. Yeah. And my world bubble was actually only with any recent Japanese immigrants who were only there temporarily through their companies or things like that. So I was in like a different bubble.
That's like my mom. That's why it's funny when the joke I always say is, like, the first time I went to the Japanese American National Museum to work, and I saw all these Japanese people, older Japanese people. I assume they don't speak English like my mom and her friends, so I started speaking Japanese to them as a hello, and then I realized they spoke English like me, and that totally blew me away. And then having them speak like funny Japanese to me and not know anything about Japanese things, it was really shocking to me. Because all the Asians I know who are over 50 are all like, now like 60s or 70s, they're all like, they don't speak English, even Chinese, because all the Chinese folks I know were first, second generation, right? So anyways, that's hilarious. Yeah, and my mom seems to know. The joke with my mom was always that she knew every Japanese person within like a 10-mile radius. Like, oh yeah, I went to, like, we bought food from her, or like we did something, we did something with her, or my mom cut her hair, or I don't know. It's always somehow we're all related. But anyway, I brought you on to give some great advice to my son. So why don't you get us started?
Well, first and foremost, I want to double check. Your son is still really into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, for a couple years, right?
Yeah, he's been doing it since he was 3. So he's like 6 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. It doesn't seem like that love is waning at all.
No, because he's good at it. If he's terrible, then it would be harder. But because he's good, he likes it.
Okay, cool. Well, this is, I guess, so I studied Aikido for 5 years, and before I decided to be an actor, I was also contemplating whether or not I wanted to be an Aikido teacher.
Wow.
So it's something that was really, really big in my life. And granted, I've kind of retired from that intensity for sure. There are things that I've definitely carried with me for the last 20 years. Yeah. Oh my, 20 years, been that long. So the thing, it's more of a feel that you develop. You develop an instinct about where someone's open. You start to see a lot of openings. There's that rhythm, but it's something you physically know, and then it kind of connects to you emotionally. That's where I feel that your instinct, your gut instinct, is created, and to never lose it. you might move on from doing jiu-jitsu and I don't know, play hockey. I don't know. But
He's not playing hockey.
I know. Yeah, you don't want to, oh my God, all those out of state tournaments. Anyway, but yeah, but even if you move on, I think that's something, especially in a martial setting, you don't have that much, that's like a lot of contact with another person. So hopefully, even if he sticks with it or not, he can look back on it, and remember how all those instincts
Yeah.
felt like, and to know that that is with you for the rest of your life, and those are really, really strong voices to have. Your instinct.
Yeah, he's doing jujitsu too. He's a black belt for sure, which is like at least another 20 something years. So I think that's a long time to go. But yeah, he's done. But I definitely feel that there's a lot of, there's a lot of great things in terms of just even like beyond just fighting and stuff. It's just stand like, even when he was younger, I remember he could stand in line and watch. Because, when we were playing soccer, the other kids would just run around and not stand still and watch. Because in martial arts, you have to stand still, watch, and then do, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of kids weren't even used to just standing still and watching at that point. So I remember just being like, I think there's other things that are good about martial arts. Even but you're right. It's like there's like a confidence. There's this like understanding of being physical, in ways that are different than.
Yeah, and it's hard to describe. I guess the closest thing being instinct, and I guess kind of shooting off from that. This is the gut instinct, the gut instinct advice, and always follow your gut. I think I don't know, you and my biggest mistakes have always been, I'm like, I'll ignore my gut on this, and I 100% have always regretted it, or
really?
been like, oh, that would have been a better choice.
That's actually hilarious. I was just taking a diverse. So I teach at a schools and stuff, college, and I was taking a diversity class about hiring, and they're actually saying you shouldn't hire by gut because they're saying that your gut is usually based on things that you're familiar with. So that's where bias comes
true.
in. So you'd be like, so like that's why if I see like an Asian person, I'm probably gonna hire them because they're Asian. But
Yeah,
but it's funny because I'm totally like I already know before I talk to them if I'm gonna hire them. Like I kind of already like in my head, I'm already like I understand this, but you're right. I think that having like listening to that instinct is really, really important.
Yeah, well, I think I guess it should in professional settings like that, it should contribute to the overall decision making that way.
Well, how do you develop the skill to listen? Or, how do you go about doing something like this? I mean, just if you have something, if not, that's cool too. But is there a way?
I'm not sure. And to be straight up honest, that is a skill I've lost during the pandemic. Because in real life, I don't talk to many people anymore. I don't have my own podcast like this, and there are just fewer opportunities for me to communicate to people this way, much less in real life. And I've noticed like it's hard for me to concentrate, and I'm sure millions of people say same thing too. So maybe like we can revisit this in like a year and be like, oh, I got it back, and I realized what I got back. So let's put a little pin on that one.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, because I do jujitsu, but I'm not good. My son's actually good and I'm not good. But I think there's something that's to be said for like that. There's like one of the things I really appreciate about doing what I like when I fight is that it's so much less about me thinking about things. And it's that gut reaction of like, if this person does this, I'm going to do this. And the more I think about it, the worse it's going to be. So I just had to go, And I think that there's something that, just learning to listen to my body, learning to go with what's happening, because the joke, oh no, it's not a joke, but the thing I always say about jujitsu is that I could be having a miserable day and then I'm angry or sad or whatever before practice. And then I go to practice and then I fight. I come out of practice. I'm not thinking about whatever made me angry or sad because I couldn't like spend my time worrying about it because if I did, I'm just going to get my ass kicked.
Oh yeah.
But, and so it's kind of like I'm just listening. All righty, we got a little bit of internet disconnection because of the COVID world. We'll just attribute everything to COVID. But let's go. I'd love to hear your next piece of advice.
Yeah. So let's. Yeah, I had been touching upon. Oh yes, always following your gut instincts. We had interesting views on that. So it was like follow your gut instincts with
Caveat.
some note of logic. Yeah, so my next thing would be social norms. What is socially accepted isn't always what might not sit well with you. It's okay to go against society or what's considered social norms. Um, it's normal to be different in the eyes of society, let's just say. So if you ever feel
Except in
alone,
Japan. Except in Japan, it's not okay to be against society.
I'm like, good thing I grew up here.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean? What are some of the social norms that you're referring to exactly? Just to,
Yeah, I mean, anything from, like when like when we were as Gen Xers, when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, for example, like
by the way, to be clear, I'm not Gen Xer. I'm a
oh, you are.
I'm a the between the X and the millennials. I'm like
Yeah, because I think we're about this. Yeah, I think
yeah,
we're
we're
the
the same
same
age.
age.
So like,
Yeah.
because I was born in '77, so I don't consider myself an Xer because I came of age during the internet. And so like, for example, like in high school, I was playing with the internet. In college, I emailed my professors.
Yeah.
And so in a way that's why I don't believe I'm X. There's actually like a term
Ah.
for the people between the X and the millennials that are like that
Mm-hmm.
transitional term. Anyway, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
go
Ah.
ahead.
No. Notable writer Paula Yu was pointing that out to me one day, and I was not completely convinced. I will go research that. Anyway, but yeah, social. But either way, 80s and 90s. Um, there was no names for like everyone in the LGBTQ communities. So then folks who are not gay or lesbian. I think back then lesbian and gay was about the only terms that existed. And so we didn't have the language back then, so we didn't know how to express it. But if people knew they were somewhere within the LGBTQ place, you still had to find a place in the world for yourself, even though then people would have been confused, like how can you be bisexual, how can you be this queer,
Or
etc.
transgender or
Or
whatever.
trans,
Yeah.
yeah, anywhere. Yeah, so sometimes, yeah, it's okay to go against what everyone else thinks
Yeah. Or
sometimes.
calling black people other names or Asians other
Yes.
names and
Yes.
those
Yeah.
kinds of things. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
By the way,
And that's, yeah,
it's
go ahead.
Zennial is the term, is the
Oh,
actual term.
Zen,
Zennial.
Zen.
No, XE.
Oh, Xe.
Zennials, because we're
Zenny.
between the X and the
Oh,
millennials. So we're not quite
yeah.
millennials, but we're not quite X either. Like X's are like
Okay.
sort of disenfranchised. They hate the world. Like they don't
Okay.
try because they came of
Yeah.
age they came out of college when
Yeah.
the economy like was killed, right? Like they didn't.
Got it.
Whereas I came out of college and everything was wonderful. Like the internet was booming at
Yeah.
that point, and then it fell
Yeah.
like proceeding like 8 years later it fell. But
Right.
like
Right. Right.
when I
Yeah. Yeah.
was like we're coming out, we are like things were relatively good and the
Pretty
economy was
stable.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Anyways,
true. That's true.
I,
Anyway.
I love the social norms and I think that's especially important for Asian Americans. I think a lot of Asians just kind of go along with things. Um, as opposed to want to speak up and say especially if it's social justice stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
I've said this story a couple times on this podcast, but I remember like in seventh grade, the only thing I remember from seventh grade, the one thing I remember from seventh grade, I was a jerk bully kid, and so I remember my seventh grade teacher said to me and to my friend that homophobia is very unattractive, and at the time I had no idea what that meant, and I laughed at her because I thought she was stupid. But it's ironic that how many years has it been since seventh grade that it's the one thing I remember from that time period. And I mean, obviously, I realize it's true, but that it took me a really long time. But it was great to see, that like somebody teaching me at that age, it resonated with me even more than all the other stuff that I was learning
Yeah.
at that time. And how
Yeah.
like her telling me that things that are unpopular, that people weren't speaking up for that community. They
Mhm.
were like, I wasn't doing anything horrible. I should say, like, I wasn't doing anything horrible. We're probably just
Yeah.
using like words and stuff, not knowing
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Teasing and
yeah,
yeah.
but for us to like really like, you know, for us to like be told that, I think was really important.
Mhm.
But I look at this
Yeah.
for, you know, like I was joking a little bit about Japan, but I think there is some validity there. You know, I think that one of the challenges with Japan is that it's so like homogenous, right? Like it's
Right.
so like you
In
have to
terms
kind of
of, yeah.
you have to fit in a way, right? And if you
Yeah,
don't fit
yeah,
in,
it's culturally homogenous.
yeah,
It's that I think though that it's almost kind of like the US, but they don't realize it
you
because
think
the
so?
US always, yeah, but underneath we've always been very diverse. Yeah, that Japan is much more diverse than they believe because people who are like Chinese, Japanese, or Korean,
No,
but people
Korean,
who have
yeah,
different
the
heritage,
Hapa,
like yeah, everyone, like I one of my good friends, she never really talked about her like Korean side of the family,
yeah,
and it was always hush
yeah.
hush.
You probably don't want to talk about that back then. You know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And so, so I think there's a plethora of all this different being Japanese, but being Japanese in the 21st century is going on already.
yeah.
And it's just about
But I think it's
giving
more about the
people
groupthink, less about
ah,
the race, but kind of like that you
mm-hmm,
like you know even the idea of individualism in Japan is obviously very different, right? And how you stand like standing up is not good, right? Like being the only person
right.
standing up and asking questions is not necessarily the
Yeah.
greatest thing.
Yeah.
But I love this advice because there's a story that I always tell about 9/11, and when there's a story about how these people from this office they they started evacuating after the first plane was hit, and they got to the bottom. You know, they walked down the stairs, they got all the way. It was tough, lots of stairs, and they got to the bottom, and and the building hadn't fallen obviously yet. And the security guard said, "Turn around, go back upstairs." You know, like it's not that's not the procedure, not to leave the building. And so everyone turned around and just started walking back. And one guy, he's like, "This feels wrong. This feels like I should leave." And so he went back down. He just walked down and walked out anyway. And then obviously it came down later. But you know, that's like this idea of like we're all kind of we just play along. And that's kind of what you're talking about social norms, because it's a security
Mm-hmm.
guard who's just like he's not even a real cop. You know, he's a person of authority,
Yeah.
and he's telling you to do something, and you just kind of okay, I'm gonna do it, and I just turn around and instead of being like, no, a fucking building just you know a plane just crashed in this building, you
Yeah.
know, like I want to be as far away from this building as
Yeah.
possible, even if I didn't
Yeah.
know the plane was gonna or the building was gonna come down. I want to be as far away from this situation as possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But it's like
Yeah.
that thinking that I think that you're talking a lot about is like not just accepting what everyone's saying or authority is saying, but being able
Mm-hmm.
to be like, this is wrong. We need to do something, or I need to get safe. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
why like
Mm-hmm.
actually real quick, the other story I'll say about
Yeah.
me and my son were really obsessed with safety for a while on like
Uh,
disasters. And one
oh
of the
yeah.
things that I learned was on airplanes, most people don't die when they get to the ground,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
what happens is the fire spreads so quickly through the cabin, people wait to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, like A, the person's dead that's going to tell you, or B, they don't know what they're doing because they've never been in a
Yeah.
crash before.
And you're you're confused. There's
Yeah.
lights and sirens and smoke and yeah.
Well, so that's why they're saying like the first thing you do is get out. Don't wait for
Mm-hmm.
somebody to tell you to get out. But like, what did it tell you in terms of the advice? Is to wait for the store or the flight attendant to tell you to do what.
Yeah.
But I was like, no.
Yeah.
You have to get out as quickly as possible. Like
Right.
this is gonna go like when this goes in
Yeah.
flames, everything is going to flames. Everyone's gonna die. So,
Yeah.
and it's funny
Yep.
because the rescuers were saying most people die with their seatbelts on,
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
because
Yep.
they didn't die on the crash, but they died in the fire
Oh,
after the crash,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah.
sitting
Yeah.
there waiting. Whereas like, no, you got to get out
Ah.
as fast. But that's like a thinking thing.
Oh,
Like, of course,
interesting.
like if you're in a plane crash, you want to get
Yeah.
out as quickly as possible, you know?
Mhm.
But you're not thinking in that
Yeah.
situation.
But
You know?
oh no, no, definitely not. I mean, I was an EMT for 4 years during college.
Wow.
So there's like a lot of desensitization training, but also just, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a skill of cutting through a situation and being like, just figuring out what's important, what's not important, what to ignore, what to take in, and then making a decision.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's just,
Or just not accepting what people, you know, it's like the Milgram test,
yeah,
right? The Milgram
yeah,
thing was
yeah,
like, that
yeah.
really changed. I remember that really changed when I learned about that, changed my life, because it really got me
Mm,
thinking about like how much authority would I listen to,
mm,
you know? And we do naturally, right? When there's a cop comes in a
yeah.
room, you just get
Oh,
like,
yeah. And this conversation has a caveat of being very difficult to do
yes.
about like 80% of the time.
Mhm.
You know, so it is definitely not it's not a piece of advice that is easy.
Yeah. But I
In
wonder,
life, yeah.
I wonder if there's ways to teach or ways to train.
Yeah.
Like that's really hard. I think it's just, I guess it's probably just thinking outside the box and
Yeah.
just not letting people tell you what to do.
You know, and honestly though, just talking scenarios out. Because I think I think everyone experiences something happens and you didn't react the way you wanted to. Later that night you're going to bed and you're like, "Oh, I could have reacted this way, that way, this way, that way."
Yeah.
And you start running scenarios through your head, and I think in that way just talking out scenarios with your son might be like just jogging your not jogging or jogging what your how you feel about a situation even might be
Yeah.
at least laying down the groundworks, even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, like your survival.
But I mean, and this is kind of why I love, like, one of my favorite TV shows is a crappy TV show called What Would You Do? And it's like, but I love the show because it creates these fake scenarios where people have to stand up for other people. And it's always really nice to see people standing up for other people. But, even more so, like, what I think about the show is a lot of times they do it in the South. And a lot of times I think people from the South are racist.
Right.
But then when I see them and I see them standing up for the Muslim person or the African American, it makes me realize that, like, I'm doing the same thing that I'm saying that they're doing, is I'm just assuming that they're all racist because they have a Southern accent. They're in Arkansas, whereas like I need to step back and be, like, and then also like just to see them standing up for people who they don't need to stand up for. That's why me and my son watch a lot of those YouTube videos. But anyway.
Yeah. Another maybe a segue advice. Speaking of videos and stuff, and especially, since you're a filmmaker, learning, especially now, that a clip that you see doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Like, it's something in the last 2 years, I'm like, oh yeah, I have to tell myself, it's just like a snippet on the news or an accident, or anything. You're like, it's only a clip. I haven't seen the entire thing, and it only tells a fraction of the entire story. It's like, you can't believe everything you see. And there's so much media.
Media literacy, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that everyone has a point of view, even if they're trying to be, quote, non-political, they're still being political, right? You're always political in some way.
Yep. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna go on to my next advice. That was a segue one. So perhaps, so like I said in my intro, like let's see, after college, like I moved to Boston and then I moved out to LA. I moved to Boston with my college friends. So in that way, I knew people. When I came out to LA, I knew absolutely no one. So if your son ends up moving to a different city or whatever, backpacks, decides to, see the world or whatever, best way to get in is volunteering.
Volunteering, okay.
Yeah. Always. Why? Like, if when you're in a new community, the best foot forward I've always found is to give of yourself. And then people are like, oh, you're a nice person. And like, and it gives you something to do. And even, depending on what kind of skill set you have, it kind of starts helping you create a place within the community you are trying to build around yourself.
Yeah. And I imagine they probably have likewise sentiment that they're probably, if you both are volunteering at the same place, it means that you're probably similar, right? Yeah. That's actually really great advice.
Yeah, like, when I got to LA, like, I know like one person, but not really. I was like crying for 6 months straight. It was a good experience overall in life, though. Because you gotta have some of the bitter with the sweet. But definitely connecting with like the Asian American acting community in LA was the little entry I needed to connect with everyone, and like yourself too.
Yeah.
And here we are, like 16 years later.
Well, and it's actually interesting as volunteer, because I think there's another great benefit to being a volunteer. I think it's also that, one of the best ways to get over depression is to actually give of yourself, to stop thinking about yourself, or, not like in a bad way, but to think about
out of your head.
Yeah, to get out of your head, give. I think there's something in the soul. Like, I'm not a religious person, but I think there's something in the soul of like helping other people. And that like there's something that magically heals you, not like magically, but there's kind of this thing about giving of yourself. And I think that, if you go to a new community and you help I think it just attracts the people that you want in your life. I've never done this, so I'm just imagining this, but I think that's really
Yeah.
awesome advice. I've never even considered that because I've always moved places, or I usually knew somebody, or if I didn't,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
like I was always
Yeah.
I
And
talk a
also,
lot, so I make friends.
really, Koji? Wait, Koji, I forgot. Do you have siblings?
I have
I
one
forgot.
sibling. Yeah,
Okay. So the thing that your son and I have in common so far is that, wait, you only have one kid, right?
just one. Yeah,
Okay, yeah. So I'm not sure how family planning is going, but we're both only children so far. So there is some solo time that comes with the territory of being an only child.
yeah.
You've probably maybe noticed that, I don't know, maybe your son is pretty good at entertaining himself. Like if like you have a bunch of adults around and he's like the only kid. I don't know, is he
Actually, it's
in
weird.
that
Weird
space?
because he's almost
Well,
like
okay, we can't have people over, but whatever.
he's almost like more like in a lot of ways like he's my little brother in that way.
Nice.
So he's less like it's weird because like one of my friends, we were at the park back when you could kind of socially distance but play.
Yeah.
We he would like he's a lot of like I noticed a lot of the kids that were by like that are single in the only child. They would kind of hesitate before playing with other kids and group going and jumping into groups, but he doesn't have that because I think that he's always just been I think that's his
Yeah.
personality, but B,
Yeah.
like I've spent a lot of time trying to work him into like
Mhm.
like those kinds of situations and just jumping
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it is interesting. I mean, I think that that's really like I've always been concerned about being an only child in that way to try to socialize him as much as possible, not in a
Yeah,
bad
and
way, you know.
yeah, but that is very similar to how my parents brought me up. Like I said, I mostly would in our little bubble of like Japanese families. So I was thrown into a herd of like 7 other kids. So, I learned the pecking order. I learned the ways of the social order of the child.
Yeah,
Yes. Um, but as a very first-hand experienced only child person, yeah, I mean, I recognize my friends, like they have siblings and they're having fights, and you're like, okay, I'm kind of out of that thing, whatever they're doing. Um, so other families kind of seemed a lot more rowdy than our family of three. Um, and I found that whether I was in a large group setting like that, or if it would be like Christmas and I was the only kid, I could be given like a set of Legos and I'll just like entertain myself. I was pretty good with being self-sufficient after a while. Which isn't, I don't know, which is neither good nor
good nor
bad. It's
bad.
kind of,
Yeah,
it's just how it is. But because perhaps and especially right now you guys have more of a sibling relationship, and maybe when he moves out of the house, when you have more of a father-son relationship, when he's like a man, he might um you might not be the first person he wants to call, and there
I
he'll
don't want to
have
be his first person to call. No, for sure.
yeah, but he'll have friends who are sibling like, but
Yeah,
never quite a sibling. So in that way, yeah, in that way, and I'm like, especially when I moved out to LA, I was like, oh, I don't want to burden my friends with like me sobbing every night. Um, so I just kind of kept it to myself, and it was hard. And but again, that's how that was just growing as a
yeah.
person, getting through that. And then yeah, being like volunteering. So I was just like I just and all the volunteer thingamajiggies usually had really nice volunteer parties or after parties or something. So you can like go out and like socialize with them. So it gave us social structure when I first
Yeah.
moved to
Well, and you
LA.
meet their friends who meet their
Yeah,
friends, and then you kind of meet more
yeah,
people, and you kind of your
yeah.
circle gets bigger and bigger. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
definitely think there's a lot to
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
that's really
So,
great advice. I love that advice. That's good. This is going to be the highlight of the show, so I'm
oh,
excited.
good. Okay. Yay. Now, then you're gonna be like, oh, great. Now he wants to go volunteering everywhere.
No, yeah, I think volunteering is important, obviously, because I've worked at institutions about that were run by
Yep.
that needed
Right,
volunteers in
volunteers.
order
Yes.
to make it happen.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm totally down for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a, and I mean, you know, like a lot of the NPOs we work for, you know, they have like social aspects and everything, and
Yeah.
you really, I think it also teaches you to be like thankful for like your fellow volunteers and you know all that stuff. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And
I don't
actually, and to your point of making friends and everything, actually, one of the big fights that or not fight, but one of the big conversations I have with people like my wife and other
Mhm.
people is that one of the best things I think for a kid could do is actually take them out of school and put them in a new school every like for like junior high to high school or elementary to junior. 'Cause I think one of the worst things that happens is when a kid is at the same school the entire time
Mhm.
with the same
Hmm.
kids,
Wait,
because
define
then
entire time.
K through 12.
Okay, okay.
Because it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to grow up with people and see them, but at the same time, you're not forcing yourself to have to change, to have to meet new people. Like, and a lot of times those people have to do it the first time in kindergarten, college. Whereas
Yeah.
like, so for example, I left like my elementary school, went to a different middle school, and then
Yeah.
went to a different high school.
Yeah.
And it really forced me to be like, I got to make new friends. I got to figure out who I am. You know, even what
Mm.
like I went from being a class clown slash bully to like not doing any of that
Mhm.
stuff when I changed schools, because
Right.
I remember when I changed schools, I was like, oh, all that shit I was doing, I don't need to do it anymore because none of these people know me.
Yeah,
I could
that's
be myself
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you know, if you go to the same school and you're like the loser, then you're kind of always going
Yeah.
to be the loser unless you like something happens that's
Yeah,
magical.
this is really interesting because I'm like, because I don't think I grew up in an area where you can go to school through 1 through 12, um, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I'm an extreme version of being moved from too many schooling
Yeah.
environments. So for me, my relationship with my friends through ninth junior high, yeah, through junior high was very fragmented. Um, so basically, I would go back to Japan every summer to go to school, but because of that, I actually like that's when you play with friends and have memories. I have none of that, and I have memories of playing with a completely different set of people for
Yeah.
3 months. It was not even playing. A lot of it was getting bullied because like I'm a student that's plopped into the middle of the school year for
Yeah.
like 2.5 months and I just leave and I come back. Yeah. So I got my share of bullying just for being different. So yeah, I think I'm yeah. And then like and then Japanese school, I don't think I really got along with anyone straight up. So that was weird. Not weird, but socially just like nothing there for me. Um, yeah, and then high school was different. So like yeah, so an extreme of that would be too much
Too much.
fragmentation that you
Yeah.
can't have meaningful memories and relationships with people.
Well, no, yeah, I don't think like going to a new school every year is a good thing, but I think
Right, right.
like elementary school and then changing into like a new place for middle
Yeah.
school, and then middle school, like going through that
Yeah,
thing,
chunks.
and kind of changing into high school, and just because I think there's different parts of your life too, is kind of the
Yeah.
way.
Oh
Like I
yeah.
think like when you're like, you know, I mean that's you know, just I just think back to like that moment. I mean, there's a really important moment in my life where, you know, 'cause I used to get in fights, I used to pick on people,
Hmm.
and I just remember that day I went to my new school, and I was just
Oh.
like
Mm.
like my first instinct was like pick on somebody, but then I remembered I was the new kid and that nobody would like back me up because nobody knew who I
Hmm.
was. And then I was like, why
Oh.
am I doing this anyway? It's stupid. I don't even like that anymore.
Yeah.
And then just being like, and that was so revolutionary. And then I made
Yeah.
friends based on people I actually wanted to hang out with, which was different
Oh.
as opposed
Yeah.
to trying to be cool or whatever
Yeah.
I was trying to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, you
I
know,
think that yeah.
that totally, and then so by the time I got to college, I was like, I was less that guy from high school and more of
Hmm.
like, I could just be kind of I mean, I wasn't developed yet or
Hmm.
anything, but it was a really
Yeah.
interesting scenario. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I think so. It sounds like you were able to get closer to the core of yourself
Yes.
by by basically washing your years with a new school, reinventing.
Well, yeah, because
Not
I think in
reinventing, but
everything. I mean, to your like even to your social
yeah.
norms comment, I think we all fall into
Hmm.
roles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You fall into who you're supposed to be. You're like you're the jock, you're the smart kid, you're the loser, you're the
Hmm.
beautiful girl, you know. And I very early in my middle school days at my prep school, I was the funny, jokey, nerdy, or funny, jokey, mean kid. You
Hmm.
know, like who like or like who was like kind of gonna pick on somebody. I remember even one time a friend was like, after I had left the school, I was talking to a friend on the phone, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we have this new kid, and I just thought of you because I thought you would like be picking on her right now." And I was like, really? That's how you thought of me? You know, like, I was like, that's the first thing you thought of when you thought of me? Like, you thought of like me picking on, like, because that wasn't like what I want to do, you know, anymore. But anyway, sorry.
Oh,
This is
wow.
really interesting. It's like therapy. Um,
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah. Yeesh. Yeah. Is your son actually gonna listen to any of these?
I don't know. There's a lot of episodes, so he has a lot of time to listen to all this, and so some of the
Okay.
stories repeat. But that's the first time I told that story, so that's good. All right.
Okay.
Well, this is your last piece of advice. Is it fifth?
I guess so. Yeah. Well, I guess the thing I've learned during the pandemic, I guess. Oh, actually, there's two things.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Well, one is leading with kindness. If your intent is always with kindness, um, that's like the best foot forward to put into the world. Um, yeah, especially right now, it's just like just being kind to everyone. We're all in our, dealing with this in our own ways. So my kindness, but for me, trying to carry that on for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
even kindness to like the people who are like anti-vaxxers or people who really piss you off. This morning, this one guy was like, he's like, I'm just vocalizing a Facebook comment. He's like, well, your health is your responsibility. It's not mine. And then I was like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to put a mask on me to protect you. I am protecting you so hard right now. You can't take this mask off me. I am so going to protect you. Like, so I decided to really double down on the kindness. That was like kindness with a lot of forceful kindness. So that's evolved a little bit. But also, and then also letting go letting go because like our lives have just become moving targets, and making peace with things that could have been, would have been, kind of making peace with that and moving forward, because I think not just, pandemic, but there's always things in our lives that we will end up carrying with us for years, and it takes a while to make peace with it. Um, but it's okay to like let things go.
Wow. That was intense Facebook comment.
Yeah, it's my head.
I just delete anybody who says anything stupid on Facebook in my, like, they're just not my friends anymore. And eventually
No,
eventually they'll leave.
No, this is actually just like a community page. So it's like
Oh,
Joe
okay.
Schmo I don't even know. And I'm like, it was a little bit disheartening because I'm like, with the theme of like moving through the world with kindness, I'm like, that's not kind. Like I just want to be like kind of like, was it your Korean dad, the wholesome Korean dad guy right now?
Yeah.
Well, that's just not kind. I just want to bring it back to Mr. Rogers. That's where we all kind of gotta go back to Mr. Roger days.
Yeah.
Like, hey.
Well, yeah, we have to put our best foot forward. I mean, that's one of the things I think that Donald Trump has really changed, is that before we used to talk about like trying to make America the greatest country in the world, and that we're trying to be the place that's most open, most free. And now we're not even talking about that. And I think something's lost. I know like that things weren't free and not everyone was free for much of American history, but we were striving for something. And I think it was important that we were striving for it. And, like honestly, like it's better now than it was like 5 years ago or 10 years or 20, 50 years ago. Right. But I think that's one of the things that's really missing from this president, is that he stopped talking. And now it's just like, let's go back to a time when things were not equal. And when people weren't, like that.
Well, I mean, like literally, he's just stopped talking now, which is fine. So, like, like you know what? It's kind of been nice because we used to be inundated with like daily, at least one daily snippet of it talking, but like now it's just like once every 3 days, maybe. I the year got elected. Sorry, I'm using different pronouns, but that's okay. When it got elected, I just stopped listening to NPR. I didn't listen to any news for a year.
Wow.
I was just so like, I was just very stressed
out. But I really like the kindness. I mean, I think I think more people live with or trying to put kindness forward. That they would, that the world, our country specifically, would be a better place.
And this might be a mind bender. how do you and practicing jiu-jitsu with kindness? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a way, you know. It's like
Oh, there is. Oh yeah,
there's
definitely is.
there's an
Oh,
asshole, like you could be an asshole partner
yeah.
versus a good
Hmm.
partner. You could be, you know,
Yeah.
there's like one of the things that like I was working with this one of the kids there, and he's just a troubled kid. And you know, like I always tell him, like when I'm in a bad position, like he bit somebody during during a fight, like it's because. And I was explaining to him, like when I'm in a bad position, when somebody's like has me really in a bad position, my first instinct is to want to bite because I can't do anything because I'm locked
Right.
up. But
Mhm.
I was like, well, but think about this: if I'm already in a bad position and I bite him, it's going to be worse for me because I'm in a bad
Yeah.
position, and
Yeah.
he could make
Doesn't
it
change
much
it.
worse for me. He
Well,
could also make it worse for me too.
yeah,
He
good
could
words.
hurt
Yeah.
me.
Mhm.
And you know, like that's one of the things that you have to kind of learn is like, you know, you could be an asshole about it, or you could be a good person and
Mhm.
still do it and still learn and still get better. And because it's not about being like not trying. You can still be
Yeah.
kind and try
Yeah.
and do your best and be
Yeah.
good, you know.
Yeah.
And but I think that's what sports is too, you know. It's
Yeah.
that like
Oh,
when you
and the other
win. Oh,
question
sorry.
though,
Yeah.
yeah. But when you're on the receiving end, when you are partnered with someone who is a little bit of an asshole, how do you handle yourself?
Yeah.
That's also
Well, that's what I was
the
saying. Like, so when you win,
that's
it's
also
one way
yeah.
to be kind, but it's also when
Yeah.
you lose, there's another way to be kind. Like nobody
Yeah.
wants to lose, but there's a good way to be to lose, and there's a bad way to win.
Mhm.
There's a good way to
Mhm.
win, and there's a bad way to win. And
Yeah.
I think it's important that, you know, like because you know, like most children aren't going to become professionals in anything in any of the
You're right.
sports. So what are they learning? They're learning those kinds of skills. You know, that's why one of the
Uh-huh.
big complaints I have a lot about youth sports, especially the really young, is they don't keep score. And I'm like, it's okay
Mm.
to keep score because I think it's okay to lose.
Mm.
But it's just like it can't be the most important thing, obviously. But it's okay to lose, and that's an important skill to learn. Like it's just
Mm.
like it's important to win. Like you can't run around the field and like you know like celebrate like you won the World Series. You know, like,
Right.
it's not cool. You know, I remember actually in basketball. This is funny. In basketball, one of the like we were like my son's team was really good. I'm the coach. I was the coach,
Oh.
and
You're like my son's team is good.
they were really
Ah,
good. It
coach.
wasn't me, it's the kids. But you know, they like I remember we score like we were just killing them, and then and so I pulled back the defense. I was just like, you know, put your hands up, don't play defense, just put your hands up. And the other team scored, and the other parents went like crazy, and they're talking so much trash.
Oh
I was
gosh.
just like, why would you know like you obviously knew that we're not playing hard. I mean, if you look at just how we were playing the first half versus the second half,
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
then I
yeah.
got pissed and I was like, okay, let's play for real. Like let's go back to playing real. And then, you know, like, but it's like that's one of the opportunities that I could have taken to be like, all right, like I get it. They're excited because they actually scored.
Mm.
But, you know, but at the same time, like it's also how you do everything. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, this is
Anyways.
I can't believe that, you know, like one of the best things about this conversation is that you brought in martial arts in the beginning. So that made me happy. Are you a black belt in Aikido?
In the end, I wasn't. I think the year I would have, I actually got into a car accident. The year I would have, well, I think in my head that I would have tested, and it was also the year I moved out of LA or moved out of Boston. So, yeah, I for a good 5 years, I was like, ah, I want to like keep training just so I can get that black belt. But because it's an Aikido dojo, we don't put a lot of weight on your belt color, and because you test when your sensei says you're ready to test,
Yeah. Okay.
so it doesn't matter how long you've been. And I was like, you know what, I'm good at it. Like I know it's like it's in my skin, it's in my bones. um and like like I said in the beginning, it's it's something I carry with me, and especially because your son's doing it so young, like it's in. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Why didn't you do like judo or something? Or well, how
At
did you
this
pick
point,
Aikido?
well, my dad told me one day that he did it. And I definitely wanted to do something that didn't have like a, I guess, American belt system, so to speak, with like a lot of the colors and stuff. Um, yeah, I was never really drawn to like karate or taekwondo. Like I fiddled around with it in college, but I guess I guess it was just knowing that I am female. I will never, not never, but I have a very, very, very low probability of ever having to get into a street fight,
Yeah.
for example. Although I almost did the other day. No, really, this guy, homeless guy, like tried to grab food, like
Wow.
aggressively grab food.
Oh,
So with me and my friend, we stood our ground, like we were ready to go though. We were ready. I'm like,
wow.
if that guy wanted to make a move, we were ready. Anyway, so it prepares you for stuff like that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I guess just the fact that there is no winner loser. I felt the philosophy of it was something that I could really learn. Not the actual fighting skills, because yeah, I'm not probably,
Yeah.
realistically not going to happen. So then if you take out the physical stuff, what's left? So I ended up choosing Aikido, and my sensei, Bill Gleason, has a very kind of philosophical and also esoteric approach to Aikido with how it was first created. There's a lot of like Shinto philosophy and stuff like that. That's all melded in. So he has that approach. So yeah, our dojo unfortunately had to close during this. I've been trying to support them as much as possible from out here, but they ended up closing their physical space during this time. So we're just kind of still having seminars on approaches to Aikido and philosophy and things like that.
Interesting. Yeah. So my son, when there's a bunch of girls in his class and they kick the shit out of him because they're really good. So I worry about those kids because, or anybody who messes with those girls, because those girls I mean, my son's good, but those girls are amazing.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the other thing that I think that's interesting about, martial arts, I did kendo for
Ah, okay.
like 20 something years,
Yeah,
and it was the biggest waste of my time.
yeah. What? How come?
Because the thing that bothered me about kendo was that it's so structured that, like, I always say, if I fought someone with a sword,
Ah.
there's only a 50% chance I would win,
Mm-hmm.
because you might do something that I'm not used to, and I wouldn't know how to do anything. I couldn't fight back. That's one of the things I like about jujitsu, is that a jujitsu person could fight somebody who doesn't know jujitsu and they would win, but they could also fight someone who knows jujitsu and they could still win, because jujitsu is about you're responding to what the other person's doing,
Yeah, yeah.
not necessarily a form or anything like that. So
Mhm,
so one of the things I liked about jujitsu as opposed to kendo, which was kendo was super like,
mhm.
you have to do this and then you have to do this and you can only hit
Yeah.
here, you can only hit
Yeah.
here, and
Right.
yeah.
It's kind of like Taekwondo, like competition Taekwondo.
Yeah, I mean,
You
taekwondo.
get
Don't even get me
points.
started on
Specific.
taekwondo.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
my
yeah.
son's cousin was like, just got his black belt. First of all, I don't think you should get a black belt at like 9 years old, but anyway, he got a black belt at 9,
It's also a
and
kitty black belt. It's like,
the first thing he wanted to do was fight my son, because he knows my son like fights normal. And then like my son looked at me and I was like, no, don't try
no.
hard.
Yeah.
And then like he just took him down and I was like, yeah, stop, like, because it's like, wow, this is really crazy. But
Yeah. If I'm like, wait, I forgot whose kid is it?
my son's cousin.
Oh, cousin.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully your cousin
Don't
won't
understand.
hear this, but oh well, I think we're on the same page on this one. If your kid has a black belt and comes out saying he wants to fight someone, that's a really bad school.
Well, I totally, actually, that's one of the things I had to tell my wife, was because like we were doing boxing and jujitsu, and I was explaining told her that it just means that when he gets 18 years old and or 21 and he's in a bar, I'm like, it means that he shouldn't have to fight, because he knows that if in a real fight he'd kick shit out of everybody in that room if he wanted to, and that he should be confident enough to know that he could walk away or he could
Walk away.
de-escalate.
Yeah.
And that unless like somebody's physically about to like hurt
Right.
you,
If you're
part of
defending
that.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah,
he shouldn't be
yeah.
looking for a fight. He has nothing to prove to a girl. He has nothing to prove to a guy. He has nothing to prove to his friends or anybody watching.
Yep.
And that,
Yep.
like, and that, like, I tell him all the time, if you fight, you lost. Like,
Yeah.
you should have been able to walk away, and that you should have been, like, and you should, and actually one of the things I do, like, they do a lot of jiu-jitsu, they do a lot of exercises, role playing. So they'll have like, kids like who like will push you, and then they'll teach you like, what do you do? Which is a lot of like, hey, like you back up, you put your hand out and say, stop, I don't like that anymore.
Yep.
Don't do that anymore. And then not back down, but you're also not about to jump in a fight. You're not gonna go punch him. But if they come after you, what do you do? But before that, you say, hey, stop. I don't want you to do that to me. Don't do that to me again, or I'm gonna bring you down.
That is literally what happened. No, that is literally what happened on the street.
Yeah.
Like it was this homeless guy. He grabbed for our food, and we had a standoff. It was actually Kitty and I. It was Kitty and I. We had a standoff with this homeless guy, and the homeless guy, thankfully, like he just talked himself out of it.
Oh.
But it was like it got tense. But it was I yelled at him to back off, and we just let him talk himself out of it. But getting that, like, just that exactly what the kids are doing gives
Using
the other
your
person
voice. Yeah, using your voice. And a lot of times
to come
they
to
don't
their
know.
senses.
Yeah, a lot of times they don't know. And a lot of times you're backing away. Like if you know, people talk big. Like actually funny story. I was at the Wolf Lodge, which is like this like raging waters inside near Disneyland.
Yeah.
And I remember these two boys next to me were making fun of this girl next to me. Little boys, like 12, 11, and they were making fun of this girl, calling her fat and stuff, just being loud and obnoxious. So I told the kids to stop it. Just be quiet. I don't want to hear it anymore. And then the father, this really like obese dude, his father came and he's like, "Why are you talking to my son?" I was like, "I was just telling him to be quiet because they're being disrespectful." And then he said, "You want to fight?" And we're like in bathing suits because we're like waiting for a ride. You know? I didn't want to get in a fight. It's freaking like this, like, you know, water park. But I said, like, if you fight me, I'll kick the shit out of you in front of your kids. And he's like, and then you could see him just like, he thought I was smaller. I'm afraid of him because he's bigger than me. But I'm like, I fought bigger people than you. And I know how to fight, and I don't need to. I'm not going to fight, but if you're gonna like fight me, then we're gonna fight. And you could just see like I wasn't scared of him, and he backed away. And I told my son, like, that's like, it was just me being like vocal, telling him, "I'm not afraid of you, but I don't want to fight you. But if you insist, then we could have a real fight." And it was like really funny. I was like, "Look, I didn't throw a punch. I never even raised my voice. I was just like, hey, you know, you want to fight? Like, we're here. Like, you know, this water park."
The best battles are the ones that are never fought.
Yeah, exactly. Although it would have been fun to beat him. But anyway.
Yeah, I know. Oh, and my paranoid thing is that every time I've like gotten physical, like against the bully or something, like it's like in my head, I'm like, oh, they'll just back off if I slightly punch them. No, I end up kicking them in the face and they have a big black eye. Like, it's just like, it's always like someone ends up going to the hospital or has a clear bruise thanks to me. So I'm like, yeah, there was one guy I did want to attack once. Well, they grabbed my ass and it was it was just I lost it. But I held myself back because I could see I could see what I wanted to do, and in that flash I could see the possible consequences of him like hitting his head or him going to the hospital. I'm like, I know he would have deserved it, but I'm like backing off. Yeah, this was when I was still like late 20s, so I still had a lot of fire.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's one of the also good things about jiu-jitsu is that you like the chances of me sending somebody to the hospital are pretty small, because most of the likely I'm just going to get you on the ground and sit on top of you and just wait for you to like calm down. Like I could probably just get you to sit down. Like I'm not going to punch because we don't teach punching and kicking.
Yeah.
So it's mostly just like I take you down, I put you down. Like if you insist, I'll choke you out. But,
do you guys not even do like scenario, like an attack, like the scenario of the attacker?
If somebody's throwing a punch, like we know how to do that, but we actually don't learn to punch and kick.
Right.
So we just learn to take them down. So you might get like the funny thing is you might get like 3 like punches on me, but I'm gonna take you down, and you're gonna be like you're gonna get hurt. I'm gonna choke you out. But it's really funny. I mean, it's even like just one of the funny stories in first grade. My son was there's like a bullying school in his class. And he was like bullying all the girls and boys and just being a jerk. But he's because he's like way taller than everybody.
Yeah.
And I remember he came to my son's academy, and my son's really good, and he wanted to fight my son during sparring because my son's smaller than him. And my son brought him down, put him in a rear naked choke. The kid tapped. And he just did it like 6 or 7 times in a row. And after practice, I was like, "This is a bully of school. Like he's just bigger. Like when push came to shove and he needed to fight, he didn't know how to fight." I was like, you should be never afraid of these people, because look, he's just taller. Nobody ever stood up to him because they couldn't. And I was like, look, the moment you fought him, he gave up, right? Like right when you put him in a choke, he gave up because he'd never been in that situation. He never had somebody put him in a choke before.
Yeah. And I think for people like statured like myself.
Well, you're 7 feet tall, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, really like it was so important. Like, training, with all my guys were like, yeah, like, like Eric is 7 feet. But it was also great when those folks and even like the senior students would be like, oh, I just learned something from you. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. He's like, I didn't know what had happened, but it was like a certain move, and the person defending themselves is behind the attacker in the end. But I did something, I went like that, and he's tall enough that my head actually hit him in the sternum.
Oh.
He was like cracking. I was like, and he was like, wow, I was just completely open right now. Thanks. I learned something. And I'm like, I don't know what I just did, but okay. And it's likewise with the taller folks too. Like, how do you defend, against a 5'4"? Like, I'm like, I know where to hit you.
Yeah. Actually, one of my professors, he's or one of the teachers, he's 5 feet tall.
Oh, I know Professor. More from Capoeira world, but yeah.
So he's a professor. He's 5 feet tall, like 98 pounds.
Yeah.
And his nickname is the Giant Killer, because in open tournaments he fights like super ginormous dudes. I mean, he's like 5 feet tall. Like, I mean, literally 5 feet tall. And he like kicks the crap out of them, and it becomes a YouTube sensation because he's like this little guy who's beating these bigger people, because he's really good at it. But thank you, Junko. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much.
We were just like fighting, and
and thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And thank you everybody. Thank you, Junko, again. And thank you,
Koji.
Bye.